Welcome to the Divided States of Media, presented by Oxford Road and in collaboration with the National Institute for Civil Discourse. I'm your host, Dan Granger. You need not look further than the social or news feed on your phone screen to see how bitterly divided we are as a country. Many of us are wondering how long this divided house can yet stand. This program is a journey of discovery where we are talking to influential people about how we got here, what we can do to unite, and asking ourselves some hard questions. For those of us that are in media, how much are we contributing to the problem? What can we do as leaders in the private sector to walk some of this back? This is a complex challenge, and we need all the help we can get. So it is with great pleasure and deep gratitude that I introduce to you our first guest, who is Carly Fiorina. Carly is the founder and chair of Fiorina Enterprises and the Unlocking Potential Foundation. She was the first woman to head a Fortune 50 company when she became CEO and president of Hewlett-Packard in 1999. She also served as economic advisor to John McCain during his presidential run in 2008. And Carly also sought the Republican nomination for president in 2016. And I can only wonder, if she had won, would we even have cause to be doing this podcast? Incidentally, Carly has since endorsed Joe Biden for the 2020 election. So welcome to the show, Carly. It's so good to have you here.
It's great to be with you, Dan. Thank you for having me. And a worthy topic indeed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I said, we need a lot of help on this one. So, you know, what I just said is maybe a good place for us to start, which is when you look around at all the divisions in this country, how different would it be today if another candidate, you, for example, had won the 2016 election in terms of the polarized state of our country?
Well, honestly, I think Donald Trump is both a symptom and a cause. He's both a result of polarization and the cause of further polarization. You know, there's an old saying that politics is downstream of culture. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. If you think about the culture that social media has created, that reality TV has created, that an explosion in various media channels has created, what all of that has done is, I think, exacerbate our tendency to be tribal. I mean, your mutual friend and mine, Henry Cloud, would tell you that as human beings, we are attracted to people like us. Mm-hmm. We are physiologically wired to recognize people like us, to be vaguely suspicious of people who are different from us. And so we're at a place where we can find our tribe so easily, and we can stay in our tribe. We can stay with our tribe. We don't ever have to leave our tribe these days. And all that predated Trump. And it means we become less and less likely to seek out those from whom we are different. The other thing that I mentioned is reality TV. I think what reality TV did is sort of give us this high on controversy and conflict and outrage. And the more outrageous and controversial people were, the more we were entertained. And somehow we're kind of mainlining that drug.
Right.
So Donald Trump is a symptom of all of that. But there is no question that Donald Trump has made all of that worse. The media, to your point, has played into that. Let us face it, Donald Trump is fantastic content. People watch it.
Yeah.
And so the media amplifies it as well. And the last thing I would just say, Dan, sorry for this long answer, but it's such an important topic.
Yeah.
What social media, I think, has done, what technology in general has done, and we see this in business, we see it in politics, we see it in our own lives. It's shortened our attention span, and it's shortened our horizon. So we get so fixated on the short term. What's happening in the next 10 minutes? What's happening in the next 10 hours? We don't really think very hard about what's happening in the next 10 months or what's happening in the next 10 years. And that shortened attention span, I think, also has very negative consequences, actually, on families, on businesses, on our nation.
Carly, that's a very healthy and balanced perspective, and at the same time, it's also terrifying Look, it's so easy, no matter who you are, you can see some of the behaviors of the president, and it's easy for people to get outraged and go, look at him. If we can just get rid of him, all this goes away. And the reality is some of those behaviors are a reflection of what we asked for, whether we voted for him or not. And when you think about the press, who by and large is not a fan, how much do they really actually like it because of what it does for the attention economy? And so I think that it's unfortunate, but I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense and is a good chance for those of us, and as I mentioned, this program is focused on people in the private sector and people who are in media, but we've got a lot of introspection to do here and not pretend that there's a magic wand that if you don't like the way that the president might conduct himself, imagining that goes away if he goes away. And so unfortunately, it's a good answer, but it's a hard answer.
Well, and to your point, if I may just amplify for a moment, I was a Republican presidential candidate in 2016.
Right.
I believed that we have too many professional politicians and we need an outsider. And I think actually a lot of Americans agreed with that. What I observed in 2016 and what I observe to this day is no one can get any airtime except Donald J. Trump. And in fact, Hillary Clinton had a hard time getting airtime against Donald J. Trump. Joe Biden has a hard time getting airtime against Donald J. Trump because Donald J. Trump is fascinating. Love him or loathe him, people watch him.
You can't look away.
Yes. And so the media has given him an extraordinary amount of time and access. And of course, he's a creature of the media. He knows how to draw their attention and keep their attention.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that he plays the game well. And I wonder what the precedent is, and I think you can go back through history and wherever you are politically, if you look at folks, whether it's AOC or Newt Gingrich, there is something about being able to make a splash and get people's attention because that attention becomes currency, that becomes power, that becomes influence, right? And so I wonder, now that we've kind of reached this level that we're at as a society, are we now addicted to this forever? Or are we in a bit of an outlier situation and we really will go back to normalcy? What's your perspective on that?
Well, as I suggested in my answer to your first question, I think this trend has been developing for some time.
Right.
And so I think it's going to take some time to change our habits, if you will, or more specifically, to change our culture. I do think part of our issue is we have gotten really confused about what leadership actually is. I think and by the way, this confusion has existed for a long time, but it's very stark now. I think we tend to think, a leader is someone with a big title, maybe a lot of fame, maybe a lot of money, maybe I see them a lot. That's a leader. Unfortunately, leaders may have all those things, but it isn't why they're a leader. A leader, the purpose of leadership is to solve problems and change the order of things for the better. That's what leaders do. So they're fundamentally different from celebrities or people with big titles. They focus on solving problems and they change things for the better. And in order to do those two things, true leadership serves. A leader serves. It actually isn't about the leader. It's about those they serve. It's about the problem they seek to solve. It's about the change they seek to bring about. And so we have to, I think, as citizens, as participants in our nation, as Americans, we have to wean ourselves off of the fascination with celebrity, fame, money, and get reoriented towards leadership and problem solving and humility and service and character.
No small task.
No small task.
So,
Although we have a long history of being able to do it.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and we're kind of all in this battle together, kind of rowing in the same direction. On that note, can we back up a little bit, and can you just share with our audience a little bit about what you've been up to since the 2016 election and how you've been working on this problem?
Yes. So my business, Carly Fiorina Enterprises, is focused on developing leaders and leadership skills. And the foundation, Unlocking Potential, is directed specifically at leaders, community-based leaders who are working in the nonprofit sector. We have a lot of problems. And so we need a lot more leaders and a lot more problem solvers. And so I concluded that I could make the biggest contribution by helping others develop their own leadership skills, giving them the confidence and the tools to tackle the problems that are right in front of them. I believe, based on experience, that each of us are capable of leadership. All of us are capable of leading. Many of us don't have that expectation for ourselves. Many of us, unfortunately, don't have the support or the resources to become leaders, but each of us can. And so that's my small contribution, to try and focus people on unlocking their own potential for leadership and positive change and impact and contribution.
And reframing it, it seems like, so we're not taking shortcuts and mistaking attention for and the quick wins for the hard work that can really create a legacy, I would imagine.
Yes, and by the way, that same dilemma exists in business too. You know, you see businesses that get so addicted to the short-term win of a popping stock price and hitting the quarter that they don't do the hard long-term work necessary to sustain a franchise that can have a positive impact in many, many ways. So this desire to take shortcuts, let's face it, it's a human desire. And positive and necessary change always takes hard work and patience and commitment over the long haul.
Well, as somebody that runs a business that focuses on media, and to an extent, you know, we're an ad agency, so we trade in attention, right? And so I say this with an acknowledgement that we are probably contributing to the problem more than we realize. I'm interested in understanding, from your perspective, having gone through the gauntlet and being a candidate, how much of the what I'll describe as rewarding of bad behavior, how much of that is media and how much of that is structural in our political system?
Well, I think it's both, and I think it's honestly a symbiotic relationship.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, in 1789, George Washington said to the nation, "Beware the rise of political parties. They will come to care only about winning." Political parties care about winning, which is to say, they don't actually care about problem solving. They don't actually care about positive change. They care about winning and staying in power. That doesn't make them evil people, but that's the truth. That's the purpose of the system, is to win and accumulate power and retain power. So that means that we, as a nation, aren't necessarily well served by the structure of political parties. It also means that if you're focused on a short-term win, run and win, run and win, run and win, raise the money to run and win, then what you actually are trying to do is remind people of all the problems, not solve them. Because it is problems that cause people to get all agitated. And particularly if you can blame the other side for the problem, wow, then everybody gets really agitated. And that raises money, right? It raises money and it gets people out to vote. And so politicians really are focused on, how do I galvanize people so that I win and get power or keep power?
Okay, so there's a couple pieces of that I want to unpack. The first is, it sounds like you're saying, at least in this country, it's really been that way from the beginning once Washington passed the baton. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think I think the structure of political parties is around gaining, amassing, retaining political power. It's not a good or a bad statement. I think it's just a fact. And so therefore, it becomes very important that citizens understand their role. Guess what? It's not a citizen's job to pledge allegiance to a party. Actually, we pledge allegiance to a flag of the United States of America, not to a party. So when we get all hung up on the fact that, oh, my political party is like my football team, I'm with them no matter what. No, it's totally backwards. They work for us, not the other way around. Point one. Point two, I think we need to reward, which we don't always, leaders who emerge in politics. And that means that we actually have to hold them account for a record of problem solving, which we don't really do, honestly.
Right.
Term limits would definitely help. That's a subject for another day. By the way, to the second half of your question about media, of course media plays into this, because a fight is compelling. You know, unpacking a problem and listening patiently to both sides so that we can learn from both sides and collaborate together to solve a problem, that takes a little more energy, takes a little more time. And it's so much easier if you can just have a quick hit and get everybody riled up about the fight and, you know, place your ad, get your money, and be done.
Well, okay, and to go back to the thesis about Washington's point, you know, some people have argued that when he said that in his farewell address, that really that was largely written by Hamilton, and he was sneaking in a jab that he thought would hurt Jefferson, right? So who knows, right? But I do feel like there is a disincentive for fair competition in politics, is something that I think we've been discovering in the process of doing this show. Where I've heard that if you're a third party, you know, you are going to literally the Democrats or Republicans will raise 300 times as much money because of those alignments, and it does feel like we've orchestrated a duopoly, which in business is absurd, and yet our whole political system is set up on that. So do you think that part of the problem may be less about the fact that you can have a party and more about the fact that we have kind of created this forced choice?
Well, I do think you're absolutely right when you describe it as a duopoly. And in business, if you had a duopoly, the way to solve that problem is through competition.
Right.
But structurally, it's next to impossible to compete with these two parties. Yeah. On the other hand, let me take the other side of the coin just for a moment.
Yeah.
A two-party system, when it works, presents different solutions to common problems. And what I know about problem solving is that problems get solved best, not when everyone agrees, because then you're probably missing something.
Yeah.
Problems get solved best when people disagree in a constructive way, learn from each other. They're united, not necessarily in their views 100% about how to get it done, but what they are united in is what to get done. What's the goal? What's the problem we're trying to solve?
Right.
And so at its best, political parties we as citizens would demand that they align on what's the problem we're trying to solve. And then let's have a real debate, a real back and forth about the best way to solve it. This is where I think Trump is a cause, because a president, a leader who happens to be president, let me say it that way. A president who is actually a leader would say, let us align as a nation. Let us agree as a nation on what are the most pressing problems for us to solve. And then let us engage from both sides and all sides on what's the best way to solve those problems, and let's collaborate to get to the best answer, because neither party on its own has the best answer. Together, we might find the best answer. Honestly, it's one of the reasons I've endorsed Biden, because he is saying that what his purpose is to align the nation around common causes and common problems, and that he will reach his hand across the aisle and collaborate with Republicans. And I do think if that's what he does, that is what we need. And he has a track record of doing that. But that's what we as citizens are going to have to demand. So whenever this election is over, we can't just retreat to our corners.
Right.
We're going to have to engage. One last thing, if I may, Dan.
Please.
It's not fair for citizens to take this passive role and say, it's all the politicians' fault. Guess what? You guys are just gals. You're just supposed to force feed me the answers, and I'll go with whoever I go, and then I'm done. I just check out and I go on with my life. Citizens are going to have to play a very active role, as we always have during the best times of our history. We're going to have to play a very active role in finding unity again, and in being willing to listen to people with whom we disagree, and actually coming together to find common ground.
And so, listen, I know you did a brave thing, as I understand it, as a lifelong Republican, coming out and endorsing the Democratic candidate. What's that been like for you? Share that experience, because I can't imagine, like, we can talk about the policy implications, and I think that's interesting, but like, as a person, when you have a set of beliefs and then you go, I am actually going to set all of those aside because I think that there's something more important, and then people start responding to you. I can't imagine this is a great way to make a ton of friends.
Well, let me say first that the set of beliefs that I hold, that people closest to the problem know best how to solve it if they're given a chance.
Yeah.
Therefore,
Yeah.
government should be limited and decentralized.
Yeah.
That everyone has enormous potential. Therefore, everyone has to be given the opportunity and the resources to unlock their potential.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, that power concentrated is power abused, always, no matter what. Therefore, you have to check power and distribute power. Those beliefs have never been perfectly aligned through the Republican Party, nor are they perfectly aligned to the Democratic Party. I start with that because although, yes, I have been a registered Republican all my life, the Republican Party has disappointed me on many, many things. Point one. Point two, I don't think loyalty to a party is the most important thing that as citizens we should be. I think as citizens, what's most important is that we're loyal to our nation, we're loyal to our family, we're loyal to our community. And so I start with all that to say it didn't really feel all that brave, honestly, although I knew I would take a ration of you-know-what, which I did.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's a lot of people that are very unhappy and have probably been unkind in the process. And then I also wonder if people on the other side are welcoming your participation, or if you're being, I don't know how that's being received. So yeah, what's it like to be you right now?
Well, let me say first that when I coach leaders or teach leadership, I say that the first and most important quality, if you want to lead, is to have courage, to develop courage, to practice courage. And the reason for that is because criticism is the price of leadership, always. So I have learned over the course of my life to put criticism in its proper place. If you are leading, you are being criticized, period. And so
let me stop you, because this is so fascinating to me. So have you really truly honed your ability to compartmentalize that type of feedback and not feel it emotionally?
Yes.
Are you able to separate that out, and it doesn't matter? You're bulletproof in terms of them being able to penetrate and really hurt your feelings on that stuff.
I have gotten there. Now, by the way, let me quickly say feedback is different than criticism.
Sure.
Feedback comes from someone who actually cares about you and who wants you to be better, and they may need to tell you something you don't really want to hear.
Yeah.
Feedback is really important, but criticism is just people yakking. And it happens all the time, and social media exacerbates it. And by the way, it gives people a feeling of power to be able to fire off some nasty tweet, and I get a lot of them. But it's not impactful to me. There was a time in my life when criticism hurt a lot, but I learned over and over and over, you cannot do anything as a leader without getting criticized. So either you are stopped by the criticism, or you learn to put it in its proper place.
Yeah. Well, that is impressive. And I don't want to go too far down the policy tunnel, but I am interested to know, when you take, forget the party, but there's policy, right? And do you get concerned that if Biden wins, that things like court packing or adding states, do you believe that some of that will, are you afraid of some of those consequences happening? And are you willing to kind of stand by your view if Biden comes in and he doesn't govern as a centrist and somebody that really wants to reach across the aisle? If Democrats win the House and the Senate, there could be a tidal wave of changes that somebody who's generally supported Republican policies don't believe in. Are you prepared for that scenario, and would you still stand by that choice, or is your money on the fact that no, he's going to govern from the center and really be more inclusive?
Well, I am banking on the fact that Biden will stay the man he has always been. And I say that because Biden has a long track record of reaching across the aisle, of collaborating with others. He has a long track record of being very humble, very empathetic. So I'm banking on the fact that he's going to be who he actually is. And I also believe, from a political perspective, that the larger his mandate is, the more he must govern from the center, because the people who will have brought him to the table are centrist. For example, if you, not to get too far into this, but if you look at the polling data, Biden will win if he continues to win with seniors and women, among others. Seniors and women, and even a great majority of the African American vote, they are not progressive leftists. They are not AOC. They actually are pretty in the middle. And so I think the coalition he's putting together will, I hope, magnify his core characteristics as a person. But yes, of course I'm concerned about that. Look, court packing is a really bad idea. And we got here, of course, both parties have played in getting us here. The Democrats don't like to remind their constituents, but it was actually Harry Reid and the Democrats who first said, you know what, we're only going to require 51 votes for federal nominees. That started this process that leads us now to the point where Supreme Court justices only have 51 votes. Both parties have thrown out the rules that tended to help the Senate be, as our founding fathers intended, a cooling saucer for the nation's emotions. Well, now the Senate is a house on steroids, and they don't really deserve their 6-year terms because they're playing in the same stuff. Court packing to me is a very different thing than DC and Puerto Rico becoming states. I personally am in favor of DC and Puerto Rico becoming states. I think it's fair. I think it's fair. They should be states, whether they're mostly Democrat or not. And if Republicans want to represent the nation, they better figure out how to look like the nation they want to represent. Well,
you're awesome at being objective. I'll say that. Okay, so let's go back to this polarization issue. And I think we've established that this is the political system. This is social media. This is all media to some extent. You've seen the charts that show how the centers of both parties have kind of moved further toward the extremes over the last few decades, right? And what I wonder from your perspective, is the problem that we are getting more different, or is the problem the civility and nature in which we express our differences, or is it both? How do you see that?
Yeah. So I would correct your language just a little bit.
Okay.
I don't think the centers of both parties are getting further apart. I think the base of both parties is getting further apart. And I'm going to
send you something.
Yeah, well, let me tell you why I make that distinction.
Sure.
And I've been out there a lot as a candidate, as a speaker, most people in this country, despite what it looks like in the media, most people in this country are not political activists. They're not.
Sure.
They're leading their lives. They're doing their business. And most Americans leading their lives and doing their business spend a whole lot of time with people less now perhaps than previously, but they
Mm-hmm.
spend time with people that they don't always agree with. The bases, meaning the power base, the money base, the vote base of each party has moved further and further to the extremes without a doubt. And if you
Okay.
go all the way back to it's all about winning,
Yeah.
then who does a political party appeal to? My
Yeah.
base.
Base, base,
Because
base. Yep.
they give me the power, they give me the money, they give me the votes. That's
Yeah.
why everyone needs to vote. It would
Yeah.
change the balance of power in this country back to the center. If all those people in the center who aren't politically active and who just get sick of politics and say, I'm not voting, I can't stand it, say
Mm-hmm.
instead, I have to vote because I can't stand it.
Mm. Okay. And so what happens if we don't go in that direction? What happens if you play this out 5, 10, 20 years down the road? If we don't turn the tide on the way that we are governing and expressing ourselves in polarized and divisive ways, what happens to the country?
Well, our success as a country is not preordained. It is not assured.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very least, what will happen in the time frame that you describe is we will become a smaller, meaner, less impactful, less influential nation. We will no longer be an inspiring beacon for the rest of the world, and it won't be a very pleasant place to live, honestly.
So it's a degradation of America as we've known it in our lifetime. Rather than making forward progress, we start sliding backwards. Does the whole thing come apart?
Well, let's a little
And
perspective
yeah,
maybe. Well, here, Joe Biden gave a speech yesterday in Gettysburg. We have to remember that there was a point in time in this nation, for example, when we were so divided that we
mm-hmm.
went to war,
Right.
a long, bloody, horrible war. There was a period of time in the 60s in this nation where political figures were being assassinated, where there were riots in the streets, where, literally thousands and thousands of people were protesting against the government on a daily basis. So we have seen division before, is my point. By the way,
Yeah.
you're proving my point on a shortened time frame. People on social media don't think about history very often, and yet it's instructive and reassuring sometimes. So we have been divided, and we know what happens when we're that divided. We're smaller, we're meaner, we're less influential, we're less impactful. And yes, if we cannot figure out a way to come back, to pull back from kind of the slide we've been on, and the slide that Donald Trump has most definitely accelerated and exacerbated, it means bad things for this country, not just in terms of lessened impact, but in terms, I fear, of greater civil unrest.
Well, so if we were to make the assumption that what you're saying is true and Donald Trump has exacerbated the problem, he didn't start the problem. He is in many ways a byproduct of the problem, but he has hastened it. Do you believe that the country can make progress on this in a meaningful way in spite of whoever the president is?
Tone is set at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership matters. Character counts.
Yeah.
It's another reason why I got to the point where I felt I had no choice but to endorse Biden, because leadership matters and character counts, and tone is set at the top. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think if we have 4 more years of this divisive, raging tone,
Mm-hmm.
that it's very hard to operate in a way that is not divisive and enraged.
So we touched on this earlier, but do you feel like a third party would be helpful if there were one that could be established and legitimized, or is the system really designed to where that's not a viable outcome?
Look, I think anything that um, hastens the um, decentralization, deconcentration of power is a good thing. Power concentrated is power abused.
Mm.
Always. It doesn't matter how well intended it is. It doesn't matter who the people are. Power concentrates, power abuse, whether it's in Washington, D.C., a corporate headquarters, in a political party. It doesn't matter. So anything that is going to check concentrated power is a good thing. It's why term limits would help. It's why a third party absolutely would help. There are things, structural, systemic things that absolutely would help. Are those things extraordinarily difficult to get done? Yes, they are. But maybe after the experience of the last 5 or 10 years, there will be an appetite to get them done.
Carly, have you seen the film Stars and Strife?
I have not actually.
Okay, it's very cool. We had the director on. We're actually posting it today, but we spoke last week, and it was co-produced with Barry Levinson, and they've got Rahm Emanuel, Leon Panetta, James Baker. I mean, people on both sides that have done some real stuff talking about this problem of polarization. Ken Langone, the Home Depot co-founder, is on it. And he says, politicians around money is like, a drug addict around cocaine, and one of the, what's that?
It's true.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to say. The fact that you were, it was such a large corporation running it. You were in a sense in the room where it happens on that level. And one of the opinions that keeps expressing itself by guests on the show is that, I say, look, politicians are working for, multinational corporations, and that is really kind of the top of the pyramid. That and high net worth donors are really at the top of the pyramid in terms of influence on our politicians. Is that true?
Well, concentrated power, the system in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
works best for the big, the powerful, the wealthy, the connected. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's why the power needs to be distributed, and the Republican Party has made no effort in that regard, even though they claim that's what they're for. So, yes, that's true. If you are a wealthy donor, you have influence that the donor who can put in $10 doesn't have. If you are a large corporation with an army of accountants and lawyers who can lobby in DC, you have an influence that a small business who's barely making it does not have.
Mm-hmm.
The system works for the wealthy, the powerful, the connected, and the big. And it's one of the reasons why complexity, I said this during my campaign, but it's just true as a problem solver. It's true as a corporate leader. When you have a system that is so complicated, it only works for the people who can take advantage of that complexity. And that's where we are right now. And that too is a long-standing problem.
So if a candidate or if a politician is thought to be business friendly, usually there's a difference, it sounds like, between whether you're friendly to large multinational corporations and the small businesses that are on Main Street, is
absolutely
what I hear you saying. Yeah.
And by the way, we have evidence of this. Look at the COVID-19 relief packages. I've been very public about this. Democrats and Republicans alike rallied around the fact, oh my gosh, we have to bail out the airlines, even though they'd spent 10 years buying back their stock and loading up on cheap debt. We got to bail out the big guys. We got to bail out the big guys. Yeah. We got to get around to small business. And they did, but they didn't do it with the same focus and energy. And the small business program hasn't been as successful as it needs to be. They didn't have the same energy around when they did the auto bailout. They didn't have the same energy around bailing out all those small companies that supplied the automobile companies. They got more focused on union workers, big concentrations of influence, vote, and powers than they did on just regular employees who aren't unionized. It happens all the time. I think what we should have started with was relief for communities, schools, small businesses, working families. But we started at the top of the pyramid, like we always do. And eventually, maybe we got down to the little guys.
Mm-hmm. And, let's stay on the business train for a little bit here, because most of the people that are going to listen to this are playing a prominent role in the operations of a business. And I know HP has been recognized for its stature as a corporate citizen. What's your take on the movement towards stakeholder capitalism, away from just pure shareholder capitalism as we've understood it?
Well, full disclosure, in the year
Yeah.
2000, so that was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
I was asked the question, what is the role of the CEO and what is the role of the company? And I said, to balance the requirements of customers, employees, communities, and shareholders. I've always believed
Prescient.
that.
Well
Well,
done.
if you are focused on long-term,
Hmm.
sustainable shareholder value, not the short-term hit, not a year or two, but a decade or two, if you're focused on long-term sustainable value, then you have to take care of your employees and you have to focus on your customers. And you actually have to be good partners to the communities in which your employees live and work. And oh, by the way, yes, you have to build a return for your shareholders. And so that's always been, in my opinion, what the best of free enterprise is about. And we have, in the business community, have moved very far away from that. No, it's about the short-term hit. It's about making the quarter, to hell with all the rest. But I think, honestly, that has been a perversion of anyone who understands what long-term success looks like versus short-term success. And I will just say one other thing, Dan. We talked about attention spans and social media. Well, technology has transformed Wall Street. It's transformed Wall Street to this extent. The average shareholder owns a stock now less than a month. And
Really?
increasingly, the stock market is moved by algorithms that own stocks for less than a minute. Okay, it's hard to focus energy on a shareholder, so to speak, when they're trading your stock minute by minute.
When everything is Tinder,
Yes, it's a
right?
currency. It's a currency. And that's also why I think you see the stock market disconnecting from the reality of the real economy.
Hmm.
What's happening is stocks have become currency. Let's trade in the ups and downs of this currency.
Yeah.
Let's trade on arbitrage. That's not the same as
Well,
investing in a company for sustainable value.
well, and so much of what we're talking about is just time horizon, right? And the reason I say Tinder, it's like everything is so transactional. I want
Yeah.
what I want. I want it on demand. I want it
I
in
want
the
it now, and
flavor they
screw
want.
you if you can't give it to me. Pardon my
Right.
French.
So
That's kind of
yeah,
what
no,
it is.
but this is this is a complex problem. So when you think about all of the business roundtable kind of shifting their focus and making these pronouncements, and then now we're in 2020, and you have all of this chaos, and you see what some people would call virtue signaling. It's critical that you say the right thing. What we had one guest called it the woke Olympics. For what you put on Instagram and making sure it strikes the right tone. How do you feel about that? Does that feel in line with the progress you're describing, or does that feel more when companies are getting political and opportunistic about things that are maybe outside of their expertise? Is that a good thing? Is that stakeholder capitalism? Is that the purpose of a corporation, or is that more the perversion you're describing?
Well, look, I have to say that I'm a board member of an organization called CECP, Corporate Executives, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose. And so I know this from my time at HP. I know this from the time I spend with many business executives. There are many, many, many companies in this country who invest deeply in their communities, who have long-term positive impact, who take it very seriously. Their employees take it seriously. In fact, one of the positive trends, I think, is that younger employees really are focused on what good a company does, do well and do good. And that tends to be increasingly a requirement of some employees. I know during my time at HP, our employees, whatever their age was, got really engaged in our work with in communities. It motivated them. It gave them purpose. Because guess what? As human beings, we don't just want to be a cog in a wheel. We want to have a purpose. So I do think there are trends that encourage companies to not just declare, to your question of virtue signaling. I'm not interested in the company's declarations. I understand they're important. What I'm more interested in is in a company's demonstration. What are they actually doing? And what do they do over the long haul? I think
That's awesome.
COVID represents an opportunity because companies are being called upon by their employees. You know, you need to have a positive impact. I, as an employee, want to know we're having a positive impact. I want to contribute to that positive impact. I truly believe most employees feel that, want that, are prepared to invest their time and energy in that. COVID represents an opportunity in another way. You know, crises are always opportunities. I honestly believe, you talk to lots of people, probably more than I do, but I talk to a lot of people, and all over the country, all the time. And I think this forced lockdown allowed everybody to sort of take a deep breath and say, you know, this pace we've been on, this frenzied checking my phone every 5 seconds, it really is stupid. And it's really not very satisfying. And there's a lot about being locked down that I don't like, but you know what I do like? I like having a little bit more time. I like having a little bit more quiet. I like having a little bit more opportunity for reflection. And I'm learning perhaps to be more empathetic because everybody's going through a hard time. That's an opportunity.
No, you're right, and it's why everybody's moving to Montana, right? In Idaho, but
or they're having conversations like this. You know,
yeah, exactly. Well, and that, you know, that's one of the great things about podcast is it's not about sound bites. It's about, you know, actually having a nuanced conversation. And, you know, one of the things we keep observing is this country just isn't doing nuance very well. But one thing that will be interesting.
Think about how popular podcasts have become.
Yeah.
They really have.
Oh, yeah.
They are a longer conversation.
Yeah, well, and that's been at the cornerstone of our business. I mean, that's how we were able to launch, is that we got to kind of get in early, and we rode the podcast wave starting in 2013. But you know, it'll be interesting to see when we have the choice to go back to all the crazy, frenetic everything, how many people hold on to some of these lessons. And I agree with you. I think to some extent, you know, the longer this goes on, as frustrating as it is to be limited in our freedoms, hopefully that we take some of the good with us. But who knows, you know, this may be, you know, I just want in 20 years to watch the Ken Burns documentary on all this and to see what the hell happened, and, you know, what happened next and what was really going on behind all the headlines. Right. But it'll be very, very interesting to see. And I think we should all hope for that. So
if I can just say, Dan, I apologize for interrupting, but you know, people ask me all the time, well, I mean, what people get frustrated by is they didn't predict the future. They can't predict the future.
Right.
We never can predict the future, but we can shape the future. We are not observers. I mean, some people sit by and observe, and it's a shame. Each of us are actors. Each of us can act and play our part. And I think the most dangerous thing of all for our nation is that people sit back passively and say, it's up to someone else. It's up to someone else to vote. It's up to someone else to govern. It's up to someone else to change our divisions. No, actually, it's not. You can play a part. You're doing this because you want to play a part, as an example. Each of us can play our part, and we should.
Well, and I couldn't agree more, and yet I am not pleased with what I am seeing when you think about the age of ask not what your country can do for you. I don't know how popular that is right now, and I'm fearful that we do not have enough incentive. You know, it's like we've been able to create our own echo chambers, and we can design a life that fits whatever preference we have. So why go out of our way for anything that is not self-serving? And so I don't know, you know, how you deal with it in a macro sense like that. We're trying to be a little bit tactical, you know, from our little corner of media. But yeah, it's a big opportunity, but it's a big problem.
It is. There's no question it is. And the only thing that I would say, again, crisis is opportunity. It is easier when the times are really good to get distracted by all this stuff. I mean, it's easier to be tribal and selfish and passive and seek instant gratification all the time when things are pretty good.
Yeah.
But guess what? Things aren't so good now.
Yeah.
And when things aren't so good, human nature tends to get more focused on the fundamentals.
So what we need is a real good depression to follow all this and knock some sense into us.
Well, or people to say enough is enough. I don't want this division and rage anymore.
No, it is the upside. I mean, if this isn't a smack across the head, then, it's coming. And
Yep.
And I think you're probably right. It takes pain, right? You got to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. So, Carly, I want to go back to this thread around stakeholder capitalism, because I want to hear your perspective on, as we think about corporations serving communities. If you're talking to a business owner or a business leader, and it's pretty common now, everybody says, well, we really need to be eco-conscious and worry about climate change and take actions to manage our carbon footprint. And you think about the ways people are trying to be more conscious in the way that they do business. And yet here we are, what powers media? Advertising. And what powers advertising? Attention, and all of these divisions and polarization. So do you believe that corporations have a duty to include unifying themes and connection and empathy for the other as part of the obligation to truly serve people in their communities? That's probably a horrible way to ask that question. I know there's like 30 things in there, but
the founding principle of free markets is enlightened self-interest. Mm-hmm. I use the term enlightened self-interest. Enlightened suggests over the longer haul. Mm-hmm. But basically, what motivates an economy is self-interest. Why do I start there? Because, again, when times are good and everything's growing, okay, maybe you don't have to think about this, but all of my business experience, which is substantial, demonstrates to me over and over and over again that a company's brand is strengthened when customers and employees believe that they are a good actor. A company's competitiveness is strengthened. Their market share grows when customers and employees believe that they are doing business with a company that is principled. Now, you can get away with bad stuff for a while. And there are companies that have gotten away with bad stuff for quite a while. But in the end, it always catches up, just like it always catches up with a person. I can give you chapter and verse of Hewlett-Packard investing deeply in communities to lift people up in that community. And what we got out of that was motivated and engaged employees. We got partners and customers who were deeply grateful and attached to us over the long haul. We got a powerful lift in our brand, and we also got increased market share. All those things can happen, but you have to have the patience to invest in those kinds of programs and then let it happen. It won't happen in a quarter. It maybe won't happen in a year, but it'll happen in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. It absolutely will, that I guarantee.
That's very helpful, and I'm really excited. We're about to play the unsolicited advice game, and before we do, have to do a little bit of business with the audience here, and just say, if you like what we're doing, please make sure you subscribe, and if you really like it, give us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. Also, make sure you visit oxfordroad.com and subscribe to The Influencer, our weekly newsletter for industry updates and thought leadership. And one other thing that's very, very important is, we're talking about care for the other, and we're talking about making an impact. And I think so many of us right now feel so powerless in so many ways. If you're running a company that wants to make a real difference, there's a cause that I want to invite you to participate in called the Koala Corps. Basically what it is that in children's hospitals across the country, there's wonderful care, world-class medical staffs, but there are so many parents who cannot be bedside with their infants 24/7. You have working parents, single parents, and so these children are alone with no one to comfort them. And there are usually tons of volunteers that want to come help and hold these kids and give them the nurturing that they need. But yet there's never funding to actually have somebody manage that program and facilitate, to train, schedule, manage, and vet and everything like that. So when my youngest daughter was in Children's Hospital for about the first 6 months of her life, my wife and I saw this problem and said, we want to do something about it. So we started something called the Koala Corps. We don't touch any money. It all goes directly to Children's Hospital. And if you're able, I would just invite you to go to koalacorps.com. That is KOALACORPS. The PS is silent.com. That is KOALACORPS.com, and give what you can. It's an important cause. So we are back with Carly, and we are about to play the unsolicited advice game, which is going to be awesome. She didn't get a lot of notice for this, but again, we're trying to take the maximum length of a tweet and give you 20 seconds to give advice to a group of people who didn't ask for it. But it's really, really helpful to get your perspective. And so the first person that we want you to give 20 seconds of advice to is Donald Trump. And when you're ready, let's go.
If you want to be a real leader, you need to realize it's not about you. It's not about you. It's never about you. It's about the people and the nation you serve.
Wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to say Joe Biden.
The core of who you are, a humble, empathetic man who has spent a lifetime collaborating with others. The core of who you are is the core of what the nation needs now. So don't listen to your handlers or the politicians in your party. Be who you are and lead from who you are.
Leaders in the marketing community.
People actually want positive messages that they can connect to. I know negative sells, but people do like to be lifted up, want to be lifted up. Take the time to think through how to lift them up.
You're good at this. Members of the media.
Do some real introspection. It's easy to throw rocks at everyone else. You guys need to really think about the role you have played, that you are playing, and that you can play going forward.
Okay, here's a good one for you. Registered Republicans.
You don't owe allegiance to the party. The R next to your name is not who you are. Think about who you actually are and what you actually believe we need in a leader, and then vote for that person.
Okay, registered Democrats.
Same message. We are citizens first.
Very good. Okay, last one is all American citizens.
Citizenship is a high honor. It's a huge responsibility. In this country, the citizen is sovereign. We are at the top of the pyramid, although we rarely act that way. We need to act that way.
Okay, and now I have a bonus question for you, which is if you could write in one person and they would become the next president, who would you write in? And because I'm talking to you, I just want you to know I'm not going to judge you if you say yourself.
Well, I'm going to take a punt on this one, Dan, because one of the really important lessons I learned in politics is never answer a theoretical, hypothetical question. It'll only get you into trouble.
You know what? You just gave me those 7, so I'm going to be happy with what I have. Thank you. Carly, talk to me about your media. You know, we're coming to the kind of final round here. I want to understand, what is your media consumption diet is a way to put it. Where do you get your information to understand what's going on?
So I purposefully go to lots of sources. So at a national news level, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Washington Post, and usually a regional paper of some kind, of course, all read online. It is the same with my business news. You know, I listen to Bloomberg and I listen to CNBC, and so I go back and forth, and it's the same with television or media. I tend to be more a reader than a viewer. So I tend to do a lot of reading on my phone or on my computer, but mostly on my phone, of lots of different media sources. But I purposely try and get different points of view about the same event.
Are there any go-tos you can tell us about?
Well, I always go to, as I said, Journal, Post, New York Times. I always go there. And I always kind of hopscotch between, one of the big three, ABC, NBC, CBS, and cable. You know, if I'm going to do MSNBC, I listen.
If you want to get your blood pressure up and you want to watch a food fight, then you turn on cable news.
And that's why I don't watch it for very long.
Yeah.
But I am sort of interested in the perspective.
All right, so let's talk tactics for a second. You know, because we're so focused on media here, and you know, you and I have talked about this already, but what specifically can we do to walk back the polarization engine that media has become? And particularly from the perspective of, you know, corporate citizens.
So if I'm understanding your question, the first thing that I would say is media can consciously and deliberately present multiple points of view, and not just as a token that you attack the whole time. You know, media does that a lot. Okay, let's bring in the token liberal or the token conservative, then let's attack them the whole time you're talking. That's not what I mean. Media can actually present alternative points of view. I think media should spend a lot of time laying the foundation of fact. Laying the foundation of fact, because one of our problems in this nation is that we don't have the same view of what the facts actually are.
Right.
Therefore, we don't have the same view of what the problems actually are. So if you don't agree on the problems, you can't move forward very well. We need to level set on what are the facts and what are the problems. Not everybody's going to do that, but we need enough people doing that.
Well, and what we're trying to figure out here is how can we move the carrot? Because we're not going to wait for everybody to just figure it out and decide to stop. You know, maybe you have, like you said, a straw man or a token perspective, but you know, is this something that's going to require government regulation? You know, do we need to go back to the fairness doctrine? Is this something that brands can demand? How do you de-escalate? How do you disincentivize what is so heavily incentivized?
Well, I do think brands do have an impact. I mean, you've seen companies pull back advertising from certain media figures or certain shows when they feel like it's just gotten over the top. I think actually that's a positive trend. I think that's a salutary signal.
Fair to say we're talking about cancel culture? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, when advertisers see something, just as an example, if advertisers see something on a cable channel program that is so outrageous in terms of either its offensiveness or its willful disregard of facts, they have acted by pulling advertising dollars. And I don't think that's cancel culture. I think that's called accountability. We're not going to advertise on your program because it does something to my brand. I think that's real. Can it devolve into cancel culture? Yes, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah. One of the things that we've seen is, you know, groups like Media Matters or Sleeping Giants that, you know, are, I think the outward appearance is that they're there to hold media accountable for the things that they say. But the problem with it is, as somebody who gets stuck in the middle of this a lot, is that it is highly partisan and it's soundbite. Here's what they mean by that. Now go get them. And if you don't renounce, you know, your affiliation with this group, and there's no nuance, there's no context, there's no conversation. And so that's where it starts to become like cancel culture, but very problematic for a lot of brands.
And by the way, Media Matters is a political organization.
Right.
One of the things that I think would be really useful in this introspection that I hope media will engage in a
Yeah.
collaborative way within your own industry
Mm-hmm.
is to get real clear about the difference between journalism and media. Everyone likes to festoon themselves in this word journalist.
Mm.
But the truth is, very little of the media is actually journalism anymore. It's entertainment. It's a business. Those are very different things. And so there's nothing wrong with admitting what is obviously true. Look, there are journalists, few and far between, and this is what journalists do. They report the facts, they're balanced in their appraisal. And then there's media. And media is entertainment, and it's a business, and we are driven by eyeballs, which drive revenue to the bottom line. Just say it out loud. It's true. We all know it. But when you have people, organizations that are masquerading as journalists, but what in fact they are either political organizations or just entertainers, that's when you get distrust of the media. And let's remember that distrust of the media is at all-time highs on all sides right now. So media as an industry may be getting the revenue, but it's not exactly satisfying its customers.
Do you think that we should require that media designate whether it is opinion or fact-based journalism?
Well, there was a time in journalism, you're far more expert on that issue than I am, but there was a time when you would go to a news show, for example, and there would be a clear delineation between this is the news, now this is an opinion, and it's an opinion of one person, it's not the opinion of the whole network. There was some demarcation. I actually think that's useful if in the portion of the program that's called news, you actually have journalists as opposed to entertainers.
Integrity, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. No, it's a good point, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Okay, listen, you've been so generous. I'm gonna just kind of land the plane here. Do you? What's next for you? And will you again seek high office, please?
Well, first, I have never planned out my life, believe it or not. I didn't have a long-term plan to become a CEO. I didn't have a long-term plan to run for president. The way I tend to live my life is to do things that I feel are challenging and impactful, recognize opportunities when they come my way, and not be afraid to tackle those opportunities. And so that's how I'm going to continue to live my life. I love running my business and my foundation. I hope we are making an impact. I believe we are. And when opportunities come my way, I won't be afraid to at least consider them.
So you're open.
Make sure I'm always open to anything.
Okay, good. And let's get some plugs in for you. Where can people get involved with you and follow what you're doing and support you?
Please go to carlyfiorina.com. Very easy, carlyfiorina.com. You'll learn about our business. You'll learn about our foundation. We have lots of opportunities for people to get engaged as a client, as a coach. So check us out.
Carly, this has been wonderful. You are wonderful. And thank you so much for what for the time that you've given us and the perspective. This show is dedicated to the notion of e pluribus unum, out of the many one. We believe that we can work through our differences without deepening divides, and we value welcoming perspectives that are different from our own. Thank you for joining us as we embark on the long road to national recovery and sustainable discourse. And as always, if you found this helpful, please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. And special thanks to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, and the team at WIT for making this happen. We have a republic. Let's try to keep it.